Good afternoon and welcome to this CLP staff development session on growing leadership. And this builds on sessions that have been delivered by colleagues in the previous academic year. My name's Ross McTaggart. I'm the Director of Education for Primary. And I've been part of a working party of school improvement staff and head teachers that have been committed to further developing leadership within the CLP. Our ambition is to create a passport to be launched later this year that can be used by all staff to further develop and reflect on their leadership behaviours. This also forms part of the Trust's commitment as part of its wider strategy to developing and supporting our staff within the Trust. Our research into how to develop leadership behaviours has neatly fallen into this familiar acronym within CLP, ACED. Our vision is that staff will receive a passport-style document that they can use to develop their leadership potential in these 4 areas, and that's whether they're a midday assistant or undertaking an NPQEL. The 4 areas are accountability, so that's accepting, providing feedback, coaching, mentoring, for example. Continuous professional learning, so that's engaging with evidence and research. There's ethical principles, which is the subject of this session. And then domain-specific knowledge, which I'll deal with in the next slide. In this model from 1993, it demonstrates how we all acquire domain-specific knowledge from these 4 areas. So first of all, formal knowledge. That's the knowledge that's found in books, documents, it's searchable online and through AI. We have informal knowledge, our lived experience that's often accumulated over time. There's then impressionistic knowledge, how we use knowledge gained from how we understand others, like predicting how others might react, for example, in certain situations. And then finally, self-regulatory knowledge, the kind of the self-awareness and knowing how we work best ourselves. Our session today will focus on the ethical principles that we can improve our awareness of to help inform the way we make decisions. The next slide exemplifies a common conundrum that you can have a quick minute discussing with the person next to you to get you warmed up on the subject of ethics. So how did you get on? This well-known conundrum threw up all the complexities of decision making. The fact that we're all free to choose, but we're not free from the responsibility of that choice. Those that chose to pull the lever, for example, and divert the tram, you may have been influenced by utilitarianism, an approach that advocates the greatest happiness for the greatest number. So therefore, like saving 5 lives, even if it meant directly being responsible for taking 1 life. But is that justifiable to directly sacrifice 1 life for the greater good? Where could this approach ultimately lead? Anyway, I'll leave this one for you to continue to debate if you wish. And we'll get on to looking at more educational based scenarios. So if we move now into what ethical leadership might look like in education, some work was done a few years ago around developing a framework that leaders might be able to use. And these built on the work around the Nolan Principles of Public Life from 1995. And they fall into 7 areas. The first being selflessness, so that school and college leaders should act solely in the interest of children and young people. For integrity, these leaders must avoid placing themselves under any obligation to people or organisations that might try inappropriately to influence them in their work. Before acting and taking decisions, they must declare and resolve openly any perceived conflict of interest and relationships. Objectivity. Leaders must act and take decisions impartially and fairly, using the best evidence and without discrimination or bias. Leaders should be dispassionate, exercising judgment and analysis for the good of children and young people. Accountability. Leaders are accountable to the public for their decisions and actions and must submit themselves to the scrutiny necessary to ensure this. Openness. Leaders should expect to act and take decisions in an open and transparent manner. Information should not be withheld from scrutiny unless there's clear and lawful reasons for so doing. Honesty. Leaders should be truthful. And finally, leadership. Leadership should exhibit these principles in their own behaviour. They should actively promote and robustly support these principles and be willing to challenge poor behaviour wherever it occurs. Leaders include both those who are paid to lead schools and those who volunteer to govern them. And then within leadership, there were the following personal characteristics or values. Trust. We hold trust on behalf of children and should be beyond reproach. We are honest about our motivations. Wisdom. We demonstrate moderation and self-awareness. We act calmly and rationally. We serve our schools and colleges with propriety and good sense. Kindness. We give difficult messages humanely where conflict is unavoidable. Justice. We seek to enable all young people to lead useful, happy, and fulfilling lives. Service. We demonstrate humility and self-control, supporting the structures, conventions, and rules which safeguard quality. Our actions protect high-quality education. Courage. We protect children and young people's safety and their right to a broad, effective, and creative education. We hold one another to account courageously. And finally, optimism. Despite difficulties and pressures, we are developing excellent education to change the world for the better. And all of these are areas that the framework emphasizes. Outside of education, there's been research into how ethics can influence decision making. And these fall into four main models, with the earliest evidence dating from around 1932. You're going to have the opportunity to examine these models in more depth shortly and then apply them to an example educational scenario. Your facilitator will organise you into groups for the task now, and when you're ready, click on to the next slide. I really hope you find the task insightful, and we look forward to bringing you further materials to support the development of your leadership behaviours later in the year.